Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Just a couple housekeeping items before we begin. Today's session is being recorded, and we will be sharing a recording of the session afterwards. My name is Melissa Chi. I'm the president and CEO of ventureLAB, which is a leading innovation hub and tech hub in York Region, Canada's second largest tech cluster, where we're proudly home to 4,300 tech companies who have created more than 600,000 jobs in the region. Today, I'm joined by Honourable Prabmeet Sarkaria, Associate Minister of Small Business and Red Tape Reduction. Thank you very much for speaking with us today, Minister. I know you're very, very busy, so we really, really do appreciate your time. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I really appreciate the opportunity. And we were just speaking a bit earlier and how much everything has changed in the past month or so since I had the opportunity, or 2 months now since we were at ventureLAB in February, and the incredible work that you and your team are doing there. So I definitely look forward to our webinar today, and I also want to take the opportunity to really stress the fact that we want to be partners or lines of communication from our government and the industry, and your members is always going to be open wherever we need to be there. I think now more than ever, it's really important to keep those lines of communication open, given the uncertainty that exists currently. But we want to be there to support our businesses, small business owners across the province, and also want to give you a shout out for your leadership during this time and for everything you've done and the great work that you've done advocating for your members and your team with the province. So thank you for all that as well.
Thank you very much, Minister. Very kind words. I think we see ourselves as partners with the province, really helping to support, keep health and safety of all Ontarians and Canadians first and foremost, obviously, but really help to support our great companies that are here to scale and go global. And that mission really is more than ever relevant, I think. And so we're happy to be able to host this and work with you and your team in the province to help that get back on track. So with that, Minister Sarkaria, for everyone who's tuned in, is here today to share what Ontario has been doing to respond to COVID-19, speak how the province is preparing for post-pandemic job creation, economic growth and recovery. And so at that point, I will mention that there were a number of questions that were pre-submitted. So we're going to try and cover as many of those in this discussion as a moderated Q&A. Minister Sarkaria, I don't know if there are other comments that you would like to mention before we get started, but I'll hand it back to you if there's anything else you'd like to remark on.
Sure. I just very briefly, I've had the opportunity to host many roundtables and discussions and webinars with our business communities across the province, but as our goal is to really try to lay a strong foundation for recovery, and I think that really starts with engaging our business community and hearing about, thank you first for putting this together, but kind of getting some really candid advice about how we what the path forward looks like, what we need to consider, and what you need to recover. And we've heard from various sectors, industries, what are the impacts on revenue, cash flow, operations. And I think, we can all really agree that there's really no playbook for a time like this. And so that's why it's so important and integral for us to have these type of discussions and these opportunities to engage in dialogue with members and companies across the province in different sectors. I think today we have the opportunity to kind of learn directly from the impacts from a tech standpoint. And I think just off the face of it, I could tell you that it's probably a lot different than what other companies face and what other businesses, industries will face. So when we're talking about revenues, when we're talking about the scale-up phases, when we're talking about the integration of these businesses, they're very significantly very different from a normal, bricks and mortar type of operation or a Main Street business. And so it's really critical for us in that forum to really hear from our tech leaders and tech industry and what maybe we can probably do to help support some of them through that, because we do recognize it's unique. Now, as we look towards the future, I think I have the opportunity of sitting on the Economic Jobs and Recovery Committee. I know we'll probably talk about it at some point in this webinar. It's an opportunity for us to really look at the post-COVID world. What does a new post-COVID world look like? how our business is going to operate in that sphere, and how are we going to be able to get back to those levels of whether it was profitability, revenues, and how are we going to do that in a safe manner. I think we can all probably also agree that nothing is going to be the same as it was pre-COVID. So we've got this new post-COVID world. We got the reality of it, and how are we going to work within that reality to better support small businesses? And so even after this call, I want to make sure that your members and Melissa yourself have the opportunity to write into our office on any specific plans on recovery, economic stimulus, fiscal stimulus plans that you think we can help incorporate or we can introduce that would help a tech-specific industry. So we've heard from so many in the past, but I'm really interested to hear from some of the discussion and with you and your members and some of the questions that they would like to see some answers to. But really looking forward to this opportunity, and really want to stress the fact that we want to be partners with your team and your members as we get through this together.
Thank you, Minister Sarkaria. I really appreciate your insights, and certainly, as we were just talking before, I think in terms of the role that technology and innovation can play in as part of the economic stimulus and the recoveries, and really as we've talked even before COVID-19, as a catalyst for the job creation and really putting Ontario and Canada on a global landscape. I think those are the opportunities for where technology, even now more than ever, can really play a significant role in getting us back on track, and what, as you said, the new normal really looks like, right? I think as you've alluded to and indicated, first and foremost, it's going to be about the health of Ontarians, but how we actually move into the next phase of this pragmatically to put us back on a path of recovery is an important one. So with that, why don't I start with a great kind of opportunity I think that the province has put together called Ontario Together, the Ontario Together Fund, which is a $50 million investment for businesses to offer emergency products, innovative solutions, or ideas just to help the COVID-19 crisis. Now, obviously, not all submissions can be funded, but if you could share really with the folks who have joined us, where are the priority areas for the government that you would really like to see some emphasis? That would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you. The Ontario Together portal was really something that came out of some discussions internally in the government. We recognize that we're in some pretty uncertain times here, and we're going to need the support of businesses and the private sector to be able to get through this together. And we've got to say that, how incredibly proud we are of Ontario companies who have offered to help and respond to the COVID crisis. We actually received over 18,000 submissions in that portal since it was launched in March. So it tells you how many people have kind of really participated. And you're right, not all are going to, the truth of it is not every proposal will be able to be funded. There's 1,000 of them in there. But the submissions are really prioritized on the most viable projects that can really quickly provide critical equipment and supplies needed in our hospitals, long-term care homes, critical public services that really have a large benefit within Ontario. So we saw initially high focus on the PPE, getting companies restructured, tools, lines restructured, getting the necessary hardware in place to be able to support those type of projects. But we're periodically updating the list as well for priority needs. Right now, the priorities still, largely exist around gowns, thermometers, swabs, masks, eye protection, but there also is an element of technology to this as well that we really kind of have a portal phase of it, which speaks to technology that could be introduced that could help in the fight against COVID-19. And I think that's where the submissions we really want to look at and kind of get into and see where some of the local Ontario-based companies can help us and support us through that. So whether right now the direct priority of that portal is a lot of the PPE stuff, a lot of the PPE equipment. It doesn't mean that it's only restricted to that. We are really interested in seeing some technological solutions to be able to help and support businesses.
Thank you, Minister. I think that's helpful for our participants today. So I think as our companies, particularly the tech ones, I know there are a few that actually you may have met when you came with for the HCI launch, who have some very interesting technologies around antibody technology and testing, as well as innovative technologies that overall from a digital health and a medical device perspective might be of interest. So certainly we will continue to as you indicated, make sure that our companies are sharing those ideas with your teams. If I could maybe morph into kind of the process of it, are there timing in terms of process? You know, you said there were 18,000 submissions, which is incredible. You know, how should we be helping our companies, you know, set expectations in terms of timing and those types of things? If we can maybe share, there were a few questions around that. If you could share that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and so we were kind of using them. We tried to, within government, of course, we've tried to implement an approach where we've kind of got a working group to make sure that we're trying to get back to every single submission. They're usually triaged by the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services, who then kind of prioritizes the projects given the supplies that are needed in hospitals, long-term care, critical public services, and then kind of also discussions within economic development, job creation, and trade also takes a key role in kind of bringing together some of the leads that can then be processed through government. So we've seen about 9,000 leads converted into about $175 million in purchase of critical supplies and equipment so far for the front lines. So that's been the kind of the result of it. I'm sure that there has been some companies that haven't had the opportunity or maybe haven't heard back. That's something that we really want to focus on, and that we've really tried from our standpoint to be able to at least get back to them and tell them if it's if their services or technology is something that we've needed, or if we don't need to, at least give them that answer back. But just given the scale of the amount of submissions that we got, it was a bit difficult, but we were still really looking forward to having at least preliminary outreach. And if there's specific ideas and concepts that you know, whether it's your members or others wanted to be able to pitch to the government, you know, our office is still, you know, open. So if you haven't heard of it and you need some follow-up, you know, reach out to my office, and we'd be more than happy to facilitate that. We'll definitely be want to make sure everyone is followed up on their submission. So I think from our side, we'd love to be that if needed, that avenue to follow up for some of those submissions.
Thank you. I think that'll be very welcome, and certainly not. It's a daunting task, right, to have that much volume and in a compressed time frame. So we certainly appreciate the government and your team and MCGS's efforts in terms of trying to just facilitate and make the process as efficient and effective as possible. So certainly part of your portfolio is you know, red tape reduction, and I think one of the questions was, given all the different opportunities to support government combating COVID-19 going forward, you know, do you have any insights or recommendations? We have some, I guess, companies who, it says up to 14 different applications. You know, what is the best kind of advice you can share with those companies in terms of navigating and helping? You know, what can we do from a hub perspective? Certainly we try to flag and triage as many as we can, but how do we reduce those barriers in order to really procure for government?
Yeah, that was one of the things. I think one of the biggest challenges coming into this is so that initially what we saw was that in the first week of the crisis response was we didn't have something like an Ontario Together portal that could kind of really bring everything together. And I think that's probably a general learning from this process has been how government can work better in those type of circumstances, and to kind of have a more centralized approach. So you don't have these companies like the ones that you're speaking about who are going to multiple ministries or multiple different channels with the same proposal. And I think now more than ever we'll see from a government approach. You know, I think post COVID there's going to be some significant changes, not just in the private sector but in the government as well, and how we kind of do projects and work through some of our projects. And I think that would probably be one of the key aspects of it, is how do we centralize some of the work so that the businesses are operating in the way that you're saying, that they're submitting to multiple different areas and ministries. But we have launched a website. I know we'll get into that a bit later on, specific regulatory reform aspects.
Yes.
But over the last 2 years, we have taken about 200 actions to cut red tape and reduce the regulatory burden. And we want to continue finding ways to help our businesses and regulations be smarter for business. And I think one of the biggest levers we have right now in a post-COVID, I would say, environment is our regulations, and how can we have smarter, better regulations that can support local tech companies within the province, whether that's from procurement or whether that's from just general policy changes in different areas that can kind of see some where we can see some growth in certain sectors. All of that is on the table. And I always say, when we're looking at red tape, we have a strong emphasis on environmental and health and safety guidelines, but sometimes there are regulations out there that could be smarter, and we want to be there to support the companies as we look to modernize those regulations. And I think that there's a great opportunity in that as well, to be able to support our small businesses and tech companies through tackling some of those barriers.
I think that's a good segue actually to the new website. And one of the things, certainly just in terms of listening to your insights, is certainly, how do we support local businesses? How do we, really help scale some of these made in Ontario companies, right? And where are the areas that from a temporary regulation or policy change, how can that play? And so Ontario's Tackling the Barriers website was recently launched. I think that's the one that you're talking about, which allows businesses to request a temporary regulation or policy change to help combat COVID-19. And so, speaking to that, maybe you could elaborate and share a little bit more whether anything that you're seeing coming through there in terms of regulatory, would that be considered for a more permanent change as we move forward?
One of the commitments we made is always been on smarter modernization of regulations, and I think you could probably make a really good case for a lot of the changes that we've made. I think we made over 50 changes in the last 3 weeks to support business, and I can give some very quick, easy examples. Sure. So, for example, restaurants weren't able to deliver alcohol through a third party with an order. So, we were able to kind of amend some of our regulations that allowed for that. Trucking companies, for example, logistics companies couldn't deliver supplies 24/7. There were certain blackout periods for them to deliver within certain municipalities between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. They couldn't deliver. And so there was a ton of opportunity there for us to look at some very critical regulations that we thought we could very easily change, and we could really easily benefit some companies or benefit small businesses, and trying to give them whatever edge we could. And I still think, just building on some of my comments before, that COVID has really taught us that nothing will really ever be the same. Whether we talk about changes in behavior of all of us, the way we interact, the way businesses interact, the way government works, I think you'll see a significant shift in that. And it really kind of gives us an opportunity to think about and engage with our stakeholders and see, how can government work better to support local domestic tech companies, whether that's through a procurement process changes, whether that is through helping and ensuring there's specific regulations in place, specific processes in place that support Ontario businesses, or makes the government willing and able to work with our tech companies. There's some very creative ideas that some people, industries and individuals have pitched us on that could probably have a significant impact, and it will see a significant and radical shift in the way government conducts its business. And I always kind of look at, even in the last 3 weeks, what we've seen in the implementation of virtual care, digital health. That I know you have a great, strong team of digital health and within ventureLAB, but I think you've seen a significant onboarding of some of these technologies across Ontario that probably would have taken a couple of years had it not been for COVID. So COVID has caused a lot of disruption within our daily kind of, I would say, the way we operate, government operates. But with disruption always comes opportunity, and that's really where we're trying to kind of use some of our regulatory levers to see how can we channel some of this disruption into an opportunity in the future for some of our businesses and some of our local tech companies that can make them even stronger going forward over the next couple of days, weeks, years, or months in the post-COVID world.
I think I like that. Disruption creates opportunity, right? I think that's really critical. And one of the things, as I was listening to your remarks, digital health is certainly one, and as you alluded to, we've worked with your team for a while now in terms of the health cluster that's here. And if we look more broadly in terms of how our startups and tech companies really can scale, it's not just through local procurement, it's through customers as well as supply chain, right? And so I think all the things that you're kind of alluding to are very insightful in terms of how do we make sure we amplify and help kind of the tech cluster that we have here and the startups that we have here really accelerate their path to growth through those various channels. And I think a big one is really around global customers and the customers you have domestically, but also the customers that you can, through Ontario and Canada's presence on the global stage, really accelerate their growth. So I think those are very insightful comments. I'll shift gears a little bit to talk about the committee that you mentioned in your earlier remarks. The new Ontario Jobs and Recovery Committee is focused on getting businesses up and running and people back to work after COVID-19 is over and as we transition. Can you share some of the committee's plans, the priorities, and how do we make sure that we can continue the dialogue with your office from a small business perspective and tech company perspective to make sure that those are getting to your attention and hearing those voices?
Yeah, I think one of the key functions of the Ontario Jobs and Recovery Committee is really focused on, like you said, getting businesses up and running again and the economy back up and running again. And that's really also shifting and dealing with the new realities that a post-COVID world brings up. We know and recognize that how we were operating in maybe February or January is not going to be the same as what we're going to operate in the next month, 2 months, 3 months, maybe even 6 months to a year or even 2 years. I think we're significantly be looking towards a vaccine as a solution to a lot of the issues right now. But it's going to be important for us in that committee to hear directly from companies like the ones represented or that work with ventureLABs, because this is where we all recognize there's a finite amount of resources available for the government to deploy. And so when we deploy the resources that we have, how are we going to do so in a manner that can probably bring about the biggest return and best return on investment? So when we're looking at job creation, when we're looking at economic development activity, output, contribution to GDP, those are all going to be very critical factors as we look towards how we're going to support small businesses going forward. And that committee really gives us an opportunity to kind of take in ideas, concepts from organizations and companies across the province, and then really kind of dwell into the details and see where we need to push some of our support forward. And that's going to be really critical. And I think a way for ventureLABs to really contribute on that is working with our office in the Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, and putting in those proposals, specific proposals that you think could really help spur some economic activity. Because we've seen the economic impact already of COVID-19 on how many businesses that's impacted, the shrinking in our GDP for this year, the impact it's had on government revenues, everyone's revenues. There's really no one that hasn't really been impacted by COVID-19. And I think that is why more than ever now it's important for us to be able to kind of come together, consult with our local leaders, experts, industries across the province, and then engage those stakeholders and in general. But if there's any specific ideas as well, like we do have a general line or general email, which is very simple: submissions@ontario.ca. If anybody wanted to make a submission to that, but our office would also be more than happy to work on some of those ideas and concepts and kind of work through them as we look forward to, and the more of a macro level approach to how we're going to combat some of the issues that we're seeing within the economy, and how we're going to kind of recover from it. And we'll also look at other jurisdictions and what they've done, and other provinces, what they've done to kind of spur that growth, and see where we can take the best practices and really deliver some good relief for our business owners across the province.
I think that's welcome news. I think also, one of the things where we talk about economic recovery and job creation, it's what we were talking about even just before we got onto this, which is talent, right? And how do we create those skilled jobs? What, particularly when we're talking about specifically the tech sector, what do those skill gaps look like, and how do we continue to repatriate, attract, and retain that talent in Ontario, right? Because those are the jobs, I think, in the talent pool that we're looking to expand, certainly from an economic development perspective and GDP. One of the other, I guess, areas that our questions came through are certainly in terms of the budget. So the provincial budget has not been released, but we know that Ontario's healthcare and economy have been hit hard. And so I think this is more of a inspirational, opportunistic, getting your kind of longer term or midterm perspective on what do small businesses have to look forward going in the future. And I think you've already kind of alluded, how we can work together with your office. But certainly if you can provide any additional perspective on that, this is certainly something I think that's top of mind from some of the questions that came in previously.
Yeah, and to kind of further speak to that, I think one of the key parts that we haven't really, what we want to emphasize is that the next the plan that the government, the Ontario Economic Plan, we had the initial Ontario Economic Plan, which was the $17 billion that involved the healthcare side, that involved the $10 billion of relief in provincial tax deferrals, whether we're talking about WSIB premiums, property taxes, and that was, and then also the Ontario Together Fund. So that was kind of the first part of the stimulus, which was, we don't know where COVID is going to take us. We don't know how long this is going to be, but this is what we're going to do in the meantime to kind of help free up some cash flow and for some of our small business. And now as we look we look forward, we've got some more information, still a lot of uncertainty there. We're, as a province, we've hit, I would say we've done probably we've taken a significant sacrifice in the economy, but we've seen some great results to that with the decrease in number of cases peaking a bit earlier than expected. So, the silver lining in all this is that we have had some success. Now, what I do think, as we go forward and we look towards more of what's going to happen in the future, that is very much going to be from the perspective of our consultations, our meetings like this today, and the submissions that you make. We do not want to presuppose what that the future stimulus looks like, because we think it's really imperative on our end to be able to speak to industry and let them guide us in what that stimulus should look like. So I think right now, we're all on a drawing, and we're trying to figure out, where can we better support and where can we better implement some, whether it's funding or resources that will help our businesses. And I think that's a critical part of it. And I think given that no one really has a playbook for a situation like this, it's going to be a critical part of the steps going forward, is making sure that we consult, we understand specific industries, whether it's the tech industry, digital health side, health industries, health tech companies, med tech companies. I think everyone's got to be a part of the conversation, and everyone's got to do kind of have the opportunity to pitch government on ideas, and from that will come the new I would say those would form the insights for what I would say would be the future stimulus program that the government comes out with. So that there's both an opportunity there. I know there might not be as much certainty in that answer as many might want, but I think it also presents an opportunity to really be able to kind of help shape what that stimulus could look like from a business perspective and a small business perspective.
I think that makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, that is the call. I think that for anyone who has dialed in and those who are participating is we have an opportunity to kind of shape the future. How take this opportunity and shape the future and share with government, from different sectors what that expertise might look like. A lot of the companies on this call had been planning for rapid business growth, and certainly, if I look at ventureLAB, the companies that we have supported both inside the hub and virtually outside of the hub, but certainly virtually since mid-March, there are kind of three kind of categories of those tech companies. Ones who likely had some liquidity challenges. And certainly, I think they are very appreciative of both the supports that the province has provided. There are those who certainly were able to pivot, right? So they're going after new businesses, new customers, and those who had multiple and diversified sets of businesses that were able to allow them to scale. All of those, however, as the economic activity restarts, what role or how does the province and from your perspective, your team, look to support those companies that were planning for rapid growth and get them back on track? And I think you've alluded to a lot of those, but if there are any kind of specific areas that you would like to hear from those high growth businesses, that would be helpful, I think, for them to hear from you, Minister.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. One of the toughest things about all of this has been how much, we were seeing record economic growth, that we were seeing job creation at its highest peak in the last couple months. And so we were really kind of marching towards some great economic success in the province of Ontario. And so I think, in short, it's a bit difficult right now to really put an answer to that question, and it's really an opportunity for us to learn those specific needs. I know we did this a couple of times, but it is very critical because within a tech ecosystem, I believe there's so many different phases, and it's significantly different than any other type of industry. It's so unique, given that you have the startup company that's struggling to from capital. Well, at all levels, fairly, the capital intensive pressures on companies are very high, and the liquidity issues. But you also have companies running at high valuations that have very low revenues or not as many revenues, so they're maybe not even. Don't even apply or don't get the required supports they need from the existing programs because there's just been that oversight to it. But we need to make sure that those measures are in place as we go forward, and we look to the future and we look to supporting these places. But when we look at maybe I can shift it towards when we look at how are we going to get them back on track is really through what the government did, a phased approach and making sure that we've announced kind of a stage 1, 2, and 3 approach. And it's really going to be when can we get back to normal again? And there might not be a new normal that is significantly similar to the one before, but how do we get to that new normal with a minimized impact on productivity and revenues for businesses, and where can the government support in that? So, a lot of the opening of the economy is going to be based off of the risk and advice across the province. They're going to be an integral part in easing those restrictions. And I think as more workplaces open and as more opportunity emerges to be able to get your workforces back up and the economy is going again, the quicker we can kind of get back to those levels of success that we've seen in the past. But we are going to be dealing with some significant economic issues in the province that we've seen already in the last couple months. The last couple of weeks, the unemployment rates have shot up, millions of people on benefits. So there's considerable challenges, but perspective from the side of public health and ensuring the safety of everybody, so that we don't kind of come back into this phase two
That's right.
a second round of COVID-19, a second wave, sorry. And so we've also got to be very structured in the opening of the economy, where a lot of businesses and individuals want us to move very quickly, and that's fair. I think that's a fair point from them, right? We've also got to manage the public health aspect of it and making sure that we're basing openings off of risk assessments as well. So that's going to be a considerable undertaking, but I do appreciate that. We had some of the best companies in this province coming into COVID-19, hiring hundreds of people, 20, 30, 40, hundreds of people every month, we're multiplying by 100 as a company, and then all of a sudden everything came to a halt. And so I think we need to really be there as a government to support some of those companies, and how we do that will be very much derived from consultation and discussion within the industry.
Thank you, Minister. I think, as you said earlier, it's a disruption, but that creates a lot of opportunity. I think that COVID-19 certainly is an unprecedented time. It's not something that any of us have gone through in our lifetimes, but I think it's refreshing and in a positive kind of positioning, as you've indicated, that the government is here to partner with industry to really rebuild Ontario's economy and where we go from here. So I think that's a positive. To close off, as you look forward from your perspective, are there lessons learned from your vantage point that you think really have created a great opportunity for us in going forward, and how, any closing remarks that you'd like to share with the participants as we round off?
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. I think, when we're looking at terms of lessons learned here, I think we're still in that phase of learning lessons, but I think we can very quickly see where some opportunities might emerge, and that is through maybe changing the way that government does business. And I know you have a ton of entrepreneurs on this line, and they're probably some of the most eager and keen to kind of look towards solutions and ways to kind of this disruption that's happened and kind of channel it into some opportunity in the future. I think that's where government has to understand that the way it conducts its business currently has to change significantly. Whether it's from a digitization process, whether it's when we look at small businesses, how is that relationship between small businesses and their own business? We've seen such a strong push towards e-commerce, retail, from the retail side, any side that we want to actually kind of discuss about. There's been a huge uptick in companies getting up and running again from an online platform content. So I think there's ways for us to kind of leverage some of that, some of what's been going on, and turn that into some opportunities down the road and down the future. But I think, we're still going to be learning from this, but we're going to be trying to do anything and everything we can from a government perspective to be able to support our small businesses, to be able to kind of use whatever tools we have in our toolbox to support them and get them back up and running again. We've had some considerable conversations with different levels of government. Everyone's working very well together to be able to put forward some solutions. We're still working out some specific issues that might exist in these programs to better support a broader set of government, broader set of businesses. But I really think that there's going to be a way for us to do whatever we can to mitigate some of the losses that we've seen. I think there could be some opportunities from a government perspective to be able to step up to the plate and change the way we do business and interact with our companies over the next couple of days, weeks, and months. So I want to say that everything is on the table from a government perspective, and I really truly mean that when we talk about consultation, engaging our businesses across various sectors, and really learning about what the challenges are and how we can kind of better address those. So I do want to kind of leave it with that, and really say that we appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion, as well as really be able to kind of look to the future, and not just talk about weathering the storm, but how we're going to come out of it stronger, better, and more resilient as with our small businesses, and kind of help them and push them through this pandemic.
Thank you, Minister. You know, we know how busy you are, so we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Thank you to everyone. I know on behalf of the small businesses and the tech companies that we all work with, they're excited, I think, to work with the government to really bring us through this next wave. And so we appreciate your time. And so thank you very much. We will be sharing this recording of the webinar, so stay tuned. And I want to thank everyone today for joining, and we'll be in touch soon. Everybody stay safe. Thank you. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Melissa. Take care.
Take care.